German Shepherd spent approximately 3 days outside a Walmart in Hesperia, California, with food beside him and a box containing his own toys. People who encountered him there described him as calm, sweet, and docile. One person went further and called him very docile and gentle. Then, animal control took him in, and from the outside, that looked like the point where the story should become easier. It didn't. After Maverick entered the shelter, he became extremely scared. Within days, the question was no longer why someone had left him outside a store. It was how much that fear would be allowed to decide before anyone had the chance to see him somewhere else. Nobody knows who left Maverick outside that Walmart or why. What remained was simpler than a motive: a dog, food, and a box containing things that belonged specifically to him. For roughly 3 days, customers and employees came and went. People noticed Maverick. Some stopped, and enough of them got close to describe the same general picture. At one point, someone left food several feet away instead of walking directly toward him. Maverick watched and waited. Only after the person gave him more space did he cross the pavement to eat. That does not make him fearless, and it does not mean he was looking for attention. It simply gives us a clearer picture of what people meant when they called him calm or gentle. Maverick could notice pressure and prefer some distance. While still being a dog, people felt comfortable being near. Someone had packed things meant specifically for him. Someone had made sure there was food. Yet, the person responsible for Maverick was gone, leaving strangers to become the people who noticed he was still there. After approximately 3 days, animal control arrived. For a moment, it seemed like the abandonment part of Maverick's story was finally over. He was leaving the parking lot, and someone had taken responsibility for what happened next. What happened next created a very different problem. On the way to the animal control vehicle, Maverick paused at the open door. There was no struggle. He simply needed more time at the threshold before stepping in. That moment does not explain what happened later. It only marks how quickly his surroundings were changing. The parking lot was suddenly behind him. The people around him were different, and he was being taken somewhere he had never been before. That somewhere was the shelter. From there, the record gets much thinner. We do not have a minute-by-minute account of what staff saw during intake, and there is no honest reason to invent some dramatic incident to fill that gap. What we do have is the result. Maverick became extremely scared. When someone came close, he stayed toward the rear instead of approaching. Food could be available in front of him, but while a person remained nearby, he hesitated to cross the space toward it. The fear did not have to look dramatic to matter. The dog being observed now looked very different from the one people had described outside. Staff still had to work with the frightened dog in front of them, and Maverick was kept in quarantine. That was a practical response to the fear they were seeing. It dealt with the immediate problem, but it also changed what could happen next. Because soon, the question would not be only how to get Maverick through today. It would be whether there was anywhere else for him to go. During a quieter period, food was placed where Maverick could reach it. The person nearby stepped away instead of waiting for him to approach. Maverick stayed toward the back for a while, watching. Then he moved forward and ate. He was still frightened, but when the pressure changed, his behavior changed with it. That did not undo what staff had already seen, and there was not unlimited time to keep trying different conditions. Secondary reports described Maverick as rescue only. The exact criteria behind that designation are not part of the public record we have. What matters here is what it changed. A straightforward adoption was no longer the obvious route out. A rescue organization would need to become involved. The question had changed again. It was no longer only what Maverick's fear meant. It was who could actually take him now. Then Maverick's situation acquired something it had not had before: a deadline. According to Liana Ayala, who had been following and sharing Maverick's case, he became so frightened after entering the shelter that he had to be kept in quarantine. Ayala said that ultimately landed him on the euthanasia list. Until then, uncertainty could still feel temporary. Maybe there would be another day to watch him, another set of conditions, another chance to see whether anything changed. Now that uncertainty had a deadline, nobody could honestly promise what Maverick would be like somewhere else. The earlier reports of docility did not prove he would be easy in a home, and the small change he had shown when more distance was offered did not erase the fear staff were managing. But waiting for a complete answer was becoming a decision of its own. What do you think? How much should Maverick's fear have counted in deciding what happened next? Tell me what you think in the comments, because caring about him was one thing. Finding someone who could actually take him was another. Ayala kept sharing Maverick's case as the problem shifted from getting attention to finding someone who could actually take responsibility for him. Organizations including Chico's Paws on Wheels and Iron Paw Rescue became part of that effort. At the Walmart, Maverick had needed someone to notice him and make a call. Now, being noticed was only the beginning. A rescue could say yes to helping and still have nowhere appropriate to send him. Someone could offer help with transport and still need a confirmed destination before Maverick ever left the shelter. Caring about him was useful, but every useful offer still had to connect to the next piece of the plan. The question was whether all that concern could become an actual place for him to go. And that meant accepting something uncomfortable from the beginning. Nobody could guarantee which Maverick would arrive. One potential foster asked the question everyone was already thinking. What happens if he gets here and he's still this scared? The honest answer was that nobody knew. The rescue could not promise he would arrive calm. What they could offer was a plan. Give him space, do not crowd him, and give him time before asking anything more of him. The people trying to help were still working with the same incomplete picture. They knew how Maverick had been described outside the Walmart. They knew how frightened he had become in the shelter. And they knew that when the pressure eased slightly, he had shown one small change. That was enough to suggest there might be more to learn. It was not enough to promise what came next. And the goal was not to prove the shelter wrong. Staff had responded to the frightened dog they had in front of them. The rescue problem was different. Could someone create another environment before the opportunity to learn anything else disappeared? That was where public attention finally had to become something practical. Someone had to accept responsibility for Maverick, and that rescue still needed somewhere for him to land. The receiving placement also had to understand that this was not a dog arriving with a neat behavioral guarantee attached to him. If they said yes, they were saying yes to what was known and to what was still uncertain. For a while, those pieces did not line up at the same time. Then one of them did. A foster-to-adopt placement became available in Washington State. For the first time since Maverick's options had started narrowing, there was a specific destination at the other end of the rescue effort. Not another post asking for help. Not another person hoping someone would step in. There was somewhere for him to go. For a moment, that felt like the answer. But he was still in California. Washington solved the destination. It did not solve the miles between them. A vehicle, a route, and a handoff still had to line up. At that point, Maverick's future was waiting on logistics, not on a lack of people willing to help. A placement is not an exit until the dog actually leaves. Now the work was about making the move real. The shelter release had to be coordinated, transport had to be arranged, and the people waiting in Washington had to remain ready while those pieces came together. There was no dramatic behavioral breakthrough that made any of this easier. Maverick did not suddenly become relaxed enough to remove the uncertainty. The plan had to move while that uncertainty was still there. That is what made May 5 matter. Until Maverick physically left, every successful conversation, every available placement, and every transport plan was still preparation. On May 5th, preparation finally became movement. Maverick left the shelter. Before we see what Washington showed, if stories like Maverick's help you understand dog behavior a little differently, leave a like. It helps more people find the channel, and I've also left a few useful behavior resources in the description. In Washington, nobody asked much of Maverick at first. Food and water were placed where he could reach them without having to pass close to anyone, and the people around him did not turn his arrival into a test of whether the shelter fear had disappeared. It hadn't. For the first stretch, Maverick remained near the edge of the room. He watched people move and kept the distance that had already mattered so much in the way he responded. Nobody crowded him. Nobody reached down every time he shifted position. When someone crossed the room, they kept moving instead of turning that movement into an invitation. What Maverick got first was not affection or reassurance. It was space, and it gave him the ability to decide how close he wanted to be without somebody immediately changing the terms. Later, after the house became quieter, Maverick crossed toward the water. No one celebrated the choice or moved toward him when he got there. He drank and was allowed to move away again. The next change was even smaller. When food was placed down later, Maverick did not wait quite as long before approaching it. He was still cautious and still watching, but the hesitation was shorter. On another quiet stretch, Maverick did not choose the farthest available point. He settled in the same room while someone else was there, as long as enough space remained between them. None of these moments would look remarkable on their own. Compared with what people had been seeing from Maverick, these were small choices that added something new without pretending the fear had vanished. There was no sudden affection, no cinematic reunion, and no proof that the shelter had been wrong. The difference was simpler. The shelter fear was no longer the last observation available. In California, distance had been part of how Maverick managed what was happening around him. In Washington, people allowed him that distance instead of immediately asking him to give it up. Over time, he began making slightly different choices inside it. Those choices did not erase the fear. They added something to it. That is what May 5 gave Maverick, not certainty about his future, but time in a different set of conditions where another piece of information could exist. At the beginning, the box of toys beside him outside Walmart seems like the detail that carries the emotional weight of the whole story. Someone had gathered things that belonged to Maverick, left food nearby, and then left the dog himself behind. By the end, the harder part is what happened after somebody finally did come for him. The dog people had described as gentle became severely frightened. Fear led to quarantine. His route out narrowed, and then time narrowed with it. What changed the ending was not somebody proving which version of Maverick had been right. It was giving him enough time and space for people to see something else. He got more time. And in that time, people got the chance to learn something else about Maverick. It did not have to come from the same place where fear had nearly become the last thing anyone got to see. If Maverick made you think differently about what a dog can show inside a shelter, watch Bugs next. In the kennel, his behavior told one story. In a home-like room, people saw something very different. His story is on the screen now.
A frightened dog does not learn better under more pressure. Good training creates clarity, predictability, and enough distance for the dog to think, make choices, and succeed. Behavior changes more reliably when we teach what to do, not simply punish what we don't want.